Yes, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for having your video on if that's possible for you. I love being able to see faces when I'm presenting, so I also understand if you can't have your video on, so that's fine. I want to encourage people to unmute and interrupt me, or put a question in the chat if you like, or a comment, and Hillary is on notice. And so is Haley to interrupt me with anything that I might be missing in the chat. So I'll be checking it too myself, but I really like to be interrupted. It makes me feel like we have a kind of dynamic going. And I also really want to hear your questions. If you have a question, probably other people have that question too. So please don't be shy about interrupting me. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen and show you some slides that I prepared for today to kind of acquaint you with the change agent, how you can use it for ESOL instruction. We're going to be very general at first. I'm going to show you around the change agent. I'm going to have you log in and look at it yourself. And then we're going to do a deep dive into at least one piece of writing, maybe two if we have time. So let's just get started here with mentioning some learning objectives that I have. I like to do this just to kind of stay accountable to, what we're trying to achieve here. By the end of this webinar, everybody here should be able to access the change agent and navigate around the site. You should be able to make copies of Google Slides so that you can adapt materials for your own use. And you should be able to help students move from collecting information in a graphic organizer, which I'll be sharing with you, to form their own writing or presentation. Just as a warm-up, I wondered if we could just share for a second what makes a piece of writing engaging for you. If you wouldn't mind just saying, what is it that makes you grab hold of a piece of writing and be interested in it?
Sometimes just the title, if it's something that's like piques my interest.
Great, just the title. If it's snappy and makes you want to find out what's going on there, good. Can you help me write titles for change agent articles? On that note, I might call on you, Lena. What else? What else helps you read something? Go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, the hook of, it might not be a title, but it could be just something that's very compelling or interesting at the start of the story. They call it the hook of an article in the newspaper that kind of captures your attention.
So can I ask you further, what is compelling about a hook?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's probably, I think Susan wrote in the chat that it's relevant to your interests in particular, something that you find interesting and you want to continue to read, something that might be controversial, something that might be, I think controversial is something that hooks people a lot, definitely.
Interesting, good.
Sometimes
thank you.
Just a buzzword. Keyword or buzzword, something that may be in the news, you don't know if it's interesting, and so you just seek additional insight.
Great. Something you've heard about, there's buzz about this thing going on, and then you see something about it, so you want to read more. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
Words which invoke imagery.
Aha, yes. When a piece of writing it has a visual feeling to it. You can kind of see it. Great, thank you. Personal stories, says Michaela in the chat. Yeah, why are personal stories compelling or interesting?
Because you can relate to them often.
Okay, great.
Sometimes you use it as a yardstick to find out how you're doing.
Very good. Yeah, it gives you perspective on your own situation. Yeah, these are great thoughts. I wish I was taking notes, actually. I did this activity partly because, as we plunge into some change agent writings, I'm hoping that you'll see echoes of what you said here in the writings in the change agent. And also, At the end of this webinar, I'm going to be inviting you to invite your students to write for the change agent. And when you have these ideas in your mind, as you're supporting them to write for a national magazine, you'll be able to coach them and help them think about, what's going to be interesting for people to read out there. What are people going to find compelling? So, well, thank you for doing that with me. And I hope that, as you do explore the change agent content, you find that the voices are compelling and relevant and engaging, not just for our adult learners, but also for us too, honestly. So let me give you a quick introduction to the change agent. It's an online magazine now. We used to publish in print, but we really don't anymore since the pandemic. It's all in print. It's all online. And it comes out in various formats online. There's PDFs available, which are really easy to print out. There's audio versions of articles, and they're now something new. We're putting our articles into Google Slides because we're aware that teachers are teaching remotely or hybrid, or even if you're teaching in person, having the article in slides is a great way to break down the text and introduce a piece of text to your students. The magazine is always very multi-level. We have beginners writing in there, intermediate, and more advanced. We like to promote stories that feature students as agents of change, just trying to live up to our title. And this can be in very micro ways as well as much more macro ways. So those are the stories that we want to lift up, partly because we think that it's very empowering for learners to see their peers taking action in the world, and that an empowered learner is going to do better in their learning when they feel like they're in charge of it. So the magazine comes out 3 times a year now. We used to come out twice a year, but now it's 3 times a year. And by using the resource with your learners, you're going to be having to teach some digital literacy skills, because if you want them to log in, for example, and listen to the audio versions of articles, they're going to need to be able to log in. They're going to need some vocabulary. Since you all are ESOL teachers, I thought I would just include a slide with some basic digital literacy vocabulary that you might need to share with your learners as you're supporting them to log in. So I'm going to have you all log in, but before we do that, I just wanted to share, some of these terms. And also, a slide that you could use to, if you're coaching your students to log in, you could use this slide. These slides will be shared with you, so you're free to copy them, adapt them, and use them however will be most helpful to you. So you can see that you need to go to the top page of the change agent. The URL is up at the top. What does URL stand for? I don't know. I had to look it up before I did this webinar. It's something like Uniform Resource Locator or something like that. Who cares? It's pretty much irrelevant. If somebody asks you, you could have the answer, but it's also one of those literacy moments where you can even say, nobody even knows what that stands for anymore. We just know the term URL, and that's really what you need to know. There's a spot on the top page to put your username and the password. The username is very simple, VALRC. It has to be all caps. The password, VALRC 2023. Also, the letters have to be in all caps. So, what I notice when I'm working with students to log in, it can be challenging. Everybody's got some sort of issue on their phone. People have all different kinds of phones, devices, laptops, tablets. It can take a little bit of class time to get everybody logged in. So you might need to slow this process down and really support people to get there. But that's what I want to do now with you all, is ask Hillary to put in the chat the link to the change agent to our top page, and it will be a hot link, so you should be able to click on it, and then ask you all to put in the username and password, which I'll leave up here on the screen, and also that will be in the chat as well. And ask you all to just take a minute now to log in. A teacher can print out as well. Exactly, Michaela. You could just print out PDFs of pages and hand them out to students, or email PDFs to your students and not ask them to log in if you feel like that wouldn't work for them. But if you want them to access the audio or just be able to explore the magazines, then you could support them to log in. All right, well, come back to the chat or come back and just give me a thumbs up in your Zoom square or something to let me know if you managed to log in. I'm going to give this a couple minutes so everybody has a chance to log in. Melissa's in.
See one thumbs up in the video.
Okay, I like seeing thumbs up. And if you're having any trouble, don't be shy about saying that either. Hillary and Haley are here to help troubleshoot. They can private message with you and go back and forth. We want to get everybody in, so don't forget about the all caps.
Got another thumbs up there.
Okay, great. Okay. Once you're in, you might want to save it so you don't have to remember it anymore. So for the people who are in, I'm going to put something in the chat. It's the issues tab, or you can just navigate to it yourself. In fact, even better if you just navigate to it yourself, because I like the more you navigate, the more you used to it you get. There's an issues tab. This issues tab will take you to a list of all of our back issues. And I want you to scroll up and down through this list and just get a sense of the different themes that we cover. And if your mind lands on one, looks particularly interesting, then click on it and see what you see. And then be ready to come back and maybe tell me what you clicked on, what grabbed your interest. This is just an initial exploration of the change agent. Oh, Susan's students were published in March 2014. I do not even remember what issue that was. So if anybody can see the March 2014 issue, I would like remind me what theme that was. And maybe we could even dig in there and find Susan's students. Oh, you're holding
I'm holding up a poster we had in our hallway with the two students.
That's the immigration issue.
Immigration. So there were two students. Yeah,
I
one was
recognize
my
that
student
beautiful.
and the other was another student with our program. So
Wonderful.
we had this up in the hall for a really long time. So.
Yay. Okay, yeah, that was our immigration issue. We have two immigration issues. Actually, one a number of years before that one. Melissa says the mental health issue is interesting. Cool. That's actually what we focused on yesterday when I presented for the ABE and GED teachers. So if you ever want to go look at a recording of that webinar, you could see what we explored there around the mental health issue. Let me know, is anybody not in? Is anybody not logged in? I know it can be hard to confess in these group situations, but I'm going to assume that if I'm not hearing of a problem, that there aren't any problems. Yeah, what else are you finding when you scroll through the issues? Susan says, creating new community. Yes. We did a series on immigrants and immigration, and that one was one of a 3-part series. Actually, I think what we're focusing on here today, it comes from that issue, so that's good. Thomas Slippy is in, good.
I like how it has intermediate beside it, or advanced beginner, or that kind of thing, the differential.
Yes, sometimes I will get an article in at a pretty high level, and so then I'll adapt it for an easier level to make it accessible in a multi-level classroom. So I don't do that for everything, but you'll find those occasionally. So in the same classroom, you could have people reading it at different levels, or you could start out by having them read the easier version, right? Now they know the story, they've kind of been through it. Now they could try and go up to the more complex one. which means, you know, the sentences are more complex. There might be harder vocabulary, you know, more clauses in a sentence, so just a little bit harder to read. But since they know the story now, that will kind of help carry them into the more complex text. So it's a great reading strategy for ESOL learners and others. Did anybody else find anything fun or interesting in the issues tab? Did anybody come across the hair issue yet? We got some surprises in there. You might be expecting normal adult ed stuff like career pathways, which we have that too, but we also have some kind of interesting stuff on the margins, like the issue on hair. And we did one on food, one on health, transportation, technology. What we do basically is we try to think of a theme that we think is relevant to adult learners. And then we put out a call for articles, which we circulate nationally to all the programs. And we invite teachers to bring the prompts into their classroom. And then I get hundreds of submissions from all over the country of students writing in response to the prompts.
And we had a question about where to find the levels of stories, which I know you'll be touching.
Yeah, so let me just do that right now. So I mentioned that, you know, this issues tab, I'm sharing my screen. So if everybody wants to join me back here on my screen share, you'll see what I'm talking about. So if you go into the issues tab, you can choose a theme that you're interested in, like our immigration stories. And you can go down to the table of contents and you can actually sort it by level. Okay, the way it first shows up is just the table of contents where the normal order of things is by page number, but you can sort it by level. And that way you can kind of find your way more quickly to the level that might be appropriate for your students. This number is a grade level equivalent. So you'll have to translate it in your mind to what that would mean for your students. So you can also see in this table of contents that there are audio versions of articles available. Not every article, but a lot of them. So My Mom is a Brave Woman. You can click on that and students can see the text while they also hear it read out loud by playing these play buttons. And they can play the button over and over again to practice, you know, hearing it, maybe reciting it themselves, practicing the pronunciation, whatever they want to do. So this is what the audio looks like. Now, that's one way into the content. It's through the issues tab. But another way into the content, which I want you to be familiar with, is this resources tab. And you go down to the third blue heading, which is called Index with Article Reading Levels and Audio. And you click on that and you get a huge index of all the change agent articles going back 15 years. And these are also sortable by level. So if you remember when we looked at that one issue, it maybe only had a handful of levels that were maybe appropriate for your students. So if you want more that are exactly the right level for your folks, you can click on level here. And now, once again, it's sorted by level, and you can find a lot more that might be appropriate, especially if you have beginners. Okay, and again, the audio is available for some of them. And, you know, I like to have my students just start at level 2 and listen to all those. And
we have a couple of questions about audio. Who's doing the audio, and does it read all the way through, or do you need to click button by button?
Great questions. Well, you're going to be shocked to hear. Let's see if we can hear. Can you all hear this? The struggle I am having now is at school. I am losing focus. I have a lot on my mind. Anybody recognize that voice? It's yours truly. I wear a lot of hats. The change agent is almost a one-woman operation. We don't have a budget to hire actors or do anything like that. And so it's just me. And if I have a cold, it sounds nasally. It's what it is. I think that in a way that's okay. It's a natural voice. I put some inflection in there to try to express, communicate meaning. Yeah, that, and when we have male writers, I ask somebody in my office, a male person in my office, to read the male writers. That's kind of how that goes. You can listen to it all the way through with one play button up here at the top if you want, or you can listen to it chunk by chunk. You can also right click here and download an MP3 version of the article, especially if you work in corrections or something and you don't have access to the internet, or if you want to upload the MP3 to your Google Classroom or something like that, you have that option too. Any other questions about the audio? Okay. Sometimes I'm starting to figure out how to have students read their own pieces, and that's something I would like to do more of, but it's complicated and it takes a lot of time. But if it should happen that your student, one of your students submits and gets published, and they might like to read their own piece, that would be really cool. I would frankly like to have more diverse voices, but it's just so little time in the day. So yeah, so those two ways into the content are good things for you to remember: the issues tab and the resources tab. Okay, let me go back to my slideshow, and do keep interrupting Hillary if anything comes up. So again, you're going to get a copy of these slides. So I hope nobody was feeling like they desperately had to take notes or write down any of those URLs or anything like that. You'll have this slide that points you to the home page, points you to the issues tab, and shows you how to find that index with the audio articles, and that's sortable by level. So it should be easy for you to get back there. Okay, let's now turn our attention to a specific article. This one is in the issue 57, Creating New Community. It's called My Neighbor. I love this piece. We led off the whole issue. We kicked off the whole issue with this piece. I put here the 3 formats it's available in: the PDF, just a nice clean single page with these nice pictures, which she provided, a picture of herself in her garden, really sweet, and a picture and a portrait of her down at the bottom. It's also available in audio, and you've seen what that looks like. And there it is again, a little screenshot of that. And then also in Google Slides. So what we're going to do is go to the Google Slides in a minute, and we're going to actually read the article out loud. And if one of you would like to volunteer to read the article, that would be great. My voice starts to get a little tired since I've been still fighting this cold for such a long time. So here's what the PDF looks like. This is not an extremely high level article, but it does have some hard words in it, and it is a lot of text, right? So this could be a little intimidating for some ESOL learners. It's just a lot. So in some ways, starting out with the Google Slides could be more inviting because there's more images in those slides, and you could take them through that way and then come back to the text, and this text will look a little bit more friendly once the students know the story. So then the audio, that's what that looks like. We've pretty much already seen that. And now the Google Slides. So I see that Hillary put the link in the chat. That's great. Let's just go to that right now. Click on that link, and see, I'll go to it on my screen too. Slide number 1 has some instructions for you, which I think I'm going to come back to those. Let's just read the story first. So if you don't mind going to slide number 6 is where the story starts. And do I have a volunteer who would maybe read?
I can read.
Oh, great. Do you have it on your screen, or should I forward
I have it on my screen.
Okay, great. So everybody
right.
just follow along with her as she finishes a slide. Just click to the next slide.
My Neighbor by Miss He. I'm not sure how you pronounce that first name. My neighbor is an older man. His name is Bill. He has lived in the neighborhood for a long time. When
yeah.
I first moved to Everett, every time I met him, he always had a serious face. He never said hello to me. I tried to say hello to him, but he ignored me. Okay. I thought he must be an introvert. Maybe he doesn't like Chinese people. I am an extrovert, and I thought I should make good relationships with my neighbors. In the summer, I like to plant some vegetables in my small garden. One year, the vegetables grew very well because there was a lot of rain. I looked at the vegetables and I had an idea. I picked some fresh vegetables and put them in a bag. I wrote a note. This is from your Chinese neighbor. These are organic vegetables. I hope you are happy every day. I put the note inside the bag and left it on the neighbor's doorstep. A few days later, when I met my neighbor outside, I said hello to him. This time he answered me politely. He did not ignore me. Since then, my neighbor smiles when he sees me. In the winter of 2021, a heavy snow fell. People couldn't go outside. Everyone was busy shoveling snow. After I finished shoveling the snow in front of my house, I found Bill's door was blocked by snow. I thought he's old. Shoveling must be hard for him. So I shoveled snow to help him. Bill thanked me very much. Bill told me he lives alone. He is 80 years old. His children work out of state, far away from Boston, so he hardly sees his children. Since then, I have often given him good food and chatted with him. Now my neighbor gets along well with me and my family. When you treat people with love, they will be friendly with you most of the time.
That's a good caveat at the end there, right? Most of the
Yeah, most of the time, yes.
Also, a little bit of a fragment in terms of a sentence, right? It's not a whole sentence. Good to notice that every once in a while in writing, those things slip through, and maybe that's okay, or maybe that's something to just notice. Yeah, what did you think about that story? Would you consider using that with your students? Why or why not?
Okay, I'll keep on talking to you. Yes, actually, I really like that, and because my student is starting to read more, and she already knows all her alphabets and the sounds. I think this will be awesome for her to read it as questions. We can stop, and do whatever she needs to do to get through the story. But I like the pictures. I like that it's not too much writing on one slide. So yeah, excellent.
Great. Okay, thanks. Others, any responses? Mary, go ahead. Just unmute.
Sorry. Thank you. I loved it. I think that this whole thing is wonderful. I can see my students being very inspired to do some of their own writing. I have a student who is into gardening, and so even though this is a little bit lower than her regular level, I will probably use this with her for that reason of inspiration, and maybe ask her to write her own story about her garden.
I
So
think gardening is one of those things too, that so many of our learners come with expertise from their country of origin. And it's nice to just elevate that expertise, I think.
So thank you. I had a quick question and I went back to the website, and I know how difficult it would be, but I was wondering if there's a way that you can search by topic, like
Mhm.
garden, or if you could search for some of those words like organic
Yeah,
and see if you
no,
can find
sorry.
something.
We
No, I know it would be
keep
really
talking about doing that. We really want to do that, but we don't have the capacity right now. But you're right, it would be fabulous. There's so many.
it would be
Yeah.
amazing. Well, it's already amazing. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Just also look around, there's a food issue. you know, there's different ways you can kind of find your way to the material, but I know it's a little bit of a hunting exercise. Other responses?
So we have a comment from Susan about stories and slides inspiring more lessons, and immigrants really being able to relate to this.
Mhm. What about the piece of her, how she dealt with this cranky guy in her neighborhood? And let me tell you, it was hard to find pictures of cranky older men that were like copyright free that I could, that was one of my challenges for this one, but
I just look around our office.
that's funny. But wasn't she so smart in how she handled it and how she owned her own thing? Like, I think people should have good relationships, so I'm going to go after this guy. I mean, she just owns her approach, you know, like, I'm going to do this, you know, even though the guy's putting out prickly vibes in her direction.
You know, one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting was that she acknowledged that she was an extrovert, which is kind of unusual for a person who doesn't yet feel comfortable with English as a language.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. I love how she says, I'm your Chinese neighbor. I hope you'll be happy every day. Like, there's just this genuine kind of human quality that I love about her. Okay, so Madeline says, what an amazing resource. I think the stories are so relatable and also inspirational. I loved her persistence, says Hillary. Yeah. So speaking of, the first try, she just earned the occasional smile. Then the snow shoveling really broke the ice. Oh, break the ice. That's a great idiom too. You could actually introduce that idiom and talk with people about how do you break the ice, you know, in any situation, but even especially when situations, a person's a little bit not forthcoming. You know, what do you do about that? And how do you not take that personally? And for immigrants trying to create new community in their new homes, you know, this is a great question. You know, how do you connect? All right, let's go back to sharing, because I want to show you a couple things about these Google Slides. So one is, at the beginning of this, there was on slide 5, there's this before you read activity. And I try to create before and after you read activities for almost every piece. So there's just a little bit of conversation first. How do you connect with neighbors? Just to get your students warmed up on this topic, get some vocabulary generated, you know, get familiar with the word neighbors, you know, just get people talking and warmed up to the topic, which research shows when you have kind of created those brain pathways towards a topic, it actually facilitates then reading on that topic because you've kind of opened up, you know, the neural pathways there. Consider some vocabulary. I always try to, even with the pieces, you know, meant to be accessible to English language learners, I like to keep some complex words in there because that's a goal, you know, is to kind of keep introducing more and more complex words. So introvert and extrovert, they're not incredibly common English words, but they're words that I think our adult learners can really relate to and would appreciate knowing those words. And then there's some other words, including hardly, which is a strange, what is that, an adverb? A strange adverb that kind of means the opposite of what you think it might mean. Anyway, so yeah, just some vocabulary to work with your students on before you read. Also on slide 4, there's a little piece about the author. And I always have this for every change agent article, a picture, if the author is willing to share a picture. I like to share a photograph and then have a short bit of biographical information so that the reader can see that they're reading something written by a peer, which I think is very powerful and I think acts as scaffolding for the reader into higher and higher levels of literacy, because they're drawn by, oh, a peer wrote this, you know, I can read this and I want to read it. So that is the role of those two pieces. Now I'm going backwards here up to the first slide. For all of our slideshows, they are viewable by anybody who has the link. However, I want to make it possible for you to adapt it if you want. So if you wanted to chunk the text differently, add more vocabulary, put in a quiz, do anything that you want to do, you would need to make a copy of it so that you were the owner of it so that you could edit it. And I'm going to show you how you do that. The instructions are here. What you do if you have a Google account is you go up to File and you make a copy of the entire presentation. Now you are the literal owner of the slideshow and you can adapt it in whatever way you want. We ask you not to change the writing by the student. That's their writing and we want you to preserve that, but you can change it as a teacher to make it work better for your classroom. If you don't have a Google account, you can go down to download and download it into your presentation software. And then you own it that way and you can adapt it. Does that make sense to people? If you would like to give it a try right now, just make a copy of it or download it, save it on your desktop, just kind of to try going through those steps. We have a number of slideshows and this is true for all of our slideshows. So this could become a teaching resource that you could really use and you might find yourself just being able to use it completely as it is, or you might be interested in adapting it. So I want you to have that experience of making a copy if you like.
And we had a couple of thumbs up on video and one in the chat. So yay.
Great, great. Okay, and there's something else I want to show you about this, and that is the after you read activities. So, the college and career readiness standards, which are relevant at every level, including beginners, ask us to make sure that we are encouraging our students to go back to the text and find evidence for what they understand the main idea to be. So you might ask your students, what's going on in this article? And they might say, well, she was trying to make friends with her neighbor. Well, what did she do to connect with her neighbor? And they should be able to go back to the text and really point to specifics about what she did to connect with her neighbor. And you want to encourage that going back and looking for evidence. And to help you and your students do that, I created this graphic organizer in slide 16. And it looks like this. It's not filled in yet. But I on slide 17, I put all the answers. Just, always just thinking about how, for one thing, whenever I create an activity, I always try to do it myself to make sure it makes sense and to make sure it's doable. So I did the activity and then I thought, why don't I just keep the work that I did here? So it's helpful for teachers. If you're presenting this to your students, you can delete this slide if you want. But yeah, if you go back, to the slides, you'll find on slide 7, that's the source. The strategy that she tried is she said hello. And the result of that strategy was he ignored her. And so if you have your students doing this, this is a little bit of practice of going and citing as the source, the location for the evidence. They need to take notes about what happened. They're using a table, so they have to understand about columns and rows. So there's all sorts of learning going on here, right? And it's actually harder than you think. I think taking notes is a hard skill. So you might want to really slow it down for your learners and take this really slow, walk people through it, let them work in pairs or small groups to kind of get through this process together, where they name the source and then say what happened. Okay, and then if you feel like you haven't belabored the point too much, there's ways to do even more with this content. And I have another slide where now maybe the student might share a strategy that they tried and the result of that strategy. So you're building here, like you really built up a lot of familiarity with vocabulary, you built up some experience getting text and taking notes. Now they might put this question on themselves and tell some of their own stories. And they have a spot that they can do this. If this table doesn't feel like it would quite work for your students, you can just take this as a model and make your own table. You could put a table on the whiteboard or on a piece of newsprint and fill it out in class altogether. Everything that I'm offering you here, nothing is rigid. It's all just kind of ideas, models, template. You get to just grab it and go with it, use it as is, or change it. And if you haven't feel like you've belabored it too much at this point and you want to build more, you could go to slide 19 and you could have the students interview their classmates and write down the name of the person they're interviewing, a strategy that they tried, and then a result of that strategy. But we haven't beaten this thing to death. If it still feels constructive to kind of keep working, you know, in this theme, there's lots of ways you can do it. You can also not do all of this and just do part of it. So what I would love to hear now is, let's say you were to do one or two or all three of those activities. What would you, so then you would have students with some notes that they took in a grid, like in a graphic organizer. What would you do to support them to maybe turn that into a more formal piece of writing? Maybe a paragraph or maybe an essay. What would you need to do?
Well, definitely you have to go over like the structure of a paragraph. You know, we indent it, we use our punctuation, make sure that our pronouns agree with our verbs and the tenses and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Exactly. You're now moving from note taking to formal writing. So it has to have those elements of formality. Good. What else would you need to do to move? Provide a paragraph model. So Susan Otero, that's a great idea. I am a total believer in providing models and even templates. Yes.
Use the
Why
graphic organizer to organize the material as a step-by-step so that you can then either decide if you're going to have where your paragraphs would end or how you would arrive at a summary or conclusion.
Excellent. There needs to be this moment where you look at this and you go, this is a lot of notes. This is not a paragraph or an essay. And you have to distinguish between a pile of notes and what you want to pull out of those notes to create something more formal. So you would need to help people choose, you know, what they wanted to focus on.
And that's a key platform for your visual learners.
Having the graphic organizer? Is that what you meant by a key platform? Okay. Yeah, Mark says, it just went away. Provide a model outline. Yeah, good point. The outline is a great way to create a structure without getting all lost in the actual writing yet, you know, just to create a structure. It's like building a house. It needs to have a frame. Sentence frames would be helpful. Yes. Excellent. These are great ideas. So you could stop really just with the notes, because again, the College and Career Readiness Standards want our students, encourage us to have our students write for different purposes. And being able to take notes is an important purpose, and it's a great accomplishment. But you could keep building on it, and you would have to assess if you felt like there was interest and motivation, and if people weren't feeling too tired of this theme, to just keep going and come out of it with like a really nice, clean, well-structured piece of writing, even a short paragraph. There would have been a lot of learning. Jin Chang says, create a vocabulary list that they could use in their writing, have simple words and complex words in the list. Yes, great. These are a lot of great strategies. And I hope, you know, if you do use the call for articles to support your students to write for the change agent, you can use some of these same strategies for when you do that. Okay, so excellent. I would really be curious to hear if anybody tries this. I have my email address in the slides, and I'll put it in the chat again. If you do try this, I'd really love to hear how it goes and whether it goes well or not, even for things that don't go well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've taken a change agent activity into the classroom when I've been teaching, and I'll sit there and go, oh, who created this activity? Of course, it was me. You know, and like often things that I think we can do in a 2-hour class, it ends up taking 2 weeks, and you know, because things just take a lot longer than you think. So I would love to hear how it goes and what you think about the activity and what your students thought about the activity.
We had a question on whether there's a list of all the articles with Google Slides.
No, there isn't. But I do want to show you another one. I think we have time. Yeah. I want to show you this one. And this is called My Mom is a Brave Woman. It's similar to the one that I just shared. Actually, can you put the link in the chat for me, Hillary? This is another one that is available in PDF, audio, and Google Slides. It's an amazing story of a woman, whose mother brought her and her 2 sisters across the Sonoran Desert, you know, to escape out of Mexico and to get to safety. It's a very powerful story that has really great detail and is a great model of writing because the story includes so much detail. And I like it as a model because I think if you, let's actually look at it together. So I'm still sharing my screen. If you all are with me, or you might have clicked into the story, but let me just quickly show you, you know, here's a picture of the author on the right and then her mom. I love being able to just share these pictures. And then the story of her mom making a hard decision, crossing the desert, running into gangs, needing to flee from gangs, running, getting lost at a certain point, running out of water. And at one point, her mother went and got water from a cow's trough. And she says, you know, that the smell, she still remembers the smell and the taste of the water from the trough. You know, this is the kind of detail that makes a story memorable. And so if you are sharing this with your students, they might have a lot to say about it. There could be controversy in here. This is a story of undocumented immigrants crossing the border illegally, escaping from what they felt was danger in their lives. There could be any number of directions that this article could go. But if you dissect it as a piece of writing, I think what you find is the thing that makes it powerful is the detail. She doesn't just say, oh, it was traumatic, or oh, it was dangerous, or oh, scary. She tells you the things that happened. And so that's a model for your students when if they want to write a piece that might get published by the change agent, they're going to need to show, you know, they're going to need to show themselves. And if they don't want to, that's fine. No pressure on anybody. But if they want to get published, if they want to have a readership, they need to hit those compelling points. So check out this piece when you can, and you'll see there's after you read activities and before you read activities. It's available in 2 levels. So hopefully that's just another option for you. The way to find the Google Slides is we didn't start doing them till the pandemic. So when was that? 2020. So you'll start finding them in 2020. And if you go to our lesson packets, which is a part of our website that I didn't point you to, but you can find it under resources. If you go to our lesson packets, you find a lot of Google Slides there towards the end of the list because it's more recent. Okay. Sorry, my voice is falling apart. Just have a couple more minutes. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Oh yeah, thank you, Hillary. Hillary, put the lesson packets link in there. Thank you. Look down towards the bottom. I think it's like starting around lesson packet 23 or so, you'll start seeing Google Slides. Okay. Does anybody else want to talk? Ask a question, make a comment? Okay. what I'll do then is just quickly give you some information about the call for articles. So we just have a brand new call for articles that was published in February. The link, knowing Hillary, she probably already put it in the chat. You can find it also in the resource under the resources tab. What we do is we put out one call for articles per year, and then from that call, we put together 3 issues of the magazine. So the next theme is student resilience and success skills. We're going to organize all the submissions that we accept into 3 different issues that will then get published during the next school year. When a student's piece is published, they get a $50 gift card. So that's a really nice little incentive that you can tell your students they'll get. And I don't need their social security number. I used to send out checks and I needed social security numbers. It was so horrible. I hated having to. So now I don't need that anymore. I can send a gift card to anybody. So I really hope to get your submissions. You can send them to me at my email address. You can really work with your students on the process. You can help them set up an email address if they don't have one already. You can work with them on how to compose an email to an editor, how to write, what to write in the body of the email, how to attach the essay, or how to drop it into the body of the email, or how to make it in a Google Doc and then share the link to the Google Doc. You know, all the different ways, whatever is most convenient. I don't care as long as I get it in some digital format. I really don't care. So support your students to do all that. They're getting all these digital literacy skills. They're writing for different purposes, including composing emails and then getting a response from me, et cetera, et cetera. If that's too much, feel free to submit on their behalf. That is totally fine with me as well, if you want to submit on behalf of your students. So, what questions do you have about the submissions process? Does anybody feel motivated to have your students write for the change agent?
I can speak a little about the process. So I did work with students, and we read articles, we wrote, did process writing basically. But then of course everybody's not ready to share their writing. But once we did submit, there was a lot of back and forth with Cynthia, and she was very supportive with like making sure things were in the right format and getting pictures. And it was really easy on, I'd say on the students' behalf, the process was very simple.
Great.
Except for the checks involved at that point in time. I believe that was an issue for one of the learners because she was undocumented, and that was an issue. But as far as like reviewing it and getting feedback and things, that was really easy.
Great, thank you. I will say one thing that is starting to happen now. I've noticed this is a new phenomenon in the last couple of years, which is I'm getting submissions that I can tell were written in the native language of the learner and then dropped into Google Translate. And then I get sent the gobbledygook that comes out of Google Translate. And I totally understand why a learner would want to do that. It's very hard to be an adult with very complex things that you want to communicate, and you're trying to do it in not your most comfortable language. So of course you want to borrow help from Google Translate. But the problem with that is that I precisely want articles written at the level that the student is at, because that's who's going to be reading it. Right? And I can't believe students are really good at communicating a lot of depth, even in a second language or a third language. So please support your students to just wrestle with those feelings, use help from Google Translate, maybe for a word or two, but definitely not dropping a whole essay into Google Translate and then sending that to me. I can't use that. I really want and embrace the beginners to go ahead and write at the level that they're at and show what they can with the English that they have. Because that is exactly who's going to be reading it and who's going to be moved by it. So,
And we have a question.
So Madeline says, this is such a wonderful resource. Can't wait to share with my colleagues. Low beginner. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Please do submit your low beginner. I really want their pieces. It's hard to get those in the change agent, but I want those. Heidi says,
And
go ahead.
correct me if I'm wrong, but students are welcome to submit the same pieces that they might submit to our new Spotlight state publication to the change agent. And Cynthia has that extra level of cachet and the extra level of getting paid for your work, which I think is so important and inspiring.
Yes, if somebody writes for the Spotlight and they want to send that to the change agent and it dovetails with our call for articles. So that's an important piece. It has to be in connection to the theme that we're publishing on. Now, I would love to get it. That would be great.
And I know you've also published some illustrations, cartoons, picture stories. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, if you have students who are artists or cartoonists or, want to draw in response to a call for articles, I would love to get those too. I love publishing student artwork. So yeah, lots to think about there. The deadline is until early May, so you do have plenty of time. And if you want to send me any questions or just be in touch with me about anything about that, I would be very happy to hear from you and we'll respond. So my email is in the chat and please do make a note of it and be in touch. So I know there's also in the chat a link to an evaluation form, which is really important if you could fill that out, and but maybe even just best to do it now while this is fresh in your mind. And I know it's really important to get feedback. I am informed by your feedback and helps make my presentations better in the future. So I do love to hear what you have to say. And is there any closing thoughts and does anybody want to unmute and just say something that a takeaway from this hour together that you might try in the classroom or just that you might percolate on a little bit in the future?
We have a that they're in person now, but always thinking of ways to have virtual lessons in place and also ways to help students develop technical skills that are accessible.
Great. And the Google Slides, you can do that in the in-person classroom too. That's not just only for remote, but yeah. Thank you, Jen. Any closing thoughts or, go ahead, Michaela, did you want to?
I was just say, if I have time, I'd like to try to index some of these to our REAP curriculum, or maybe I can get an intern or volunteer to do some of that work for me. But it seems like a lot of the topics are very much related to our life skills curriculum. So they would be a really great addition to our resources list.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, it's 4:30, so maybe we should close. I just want to appreciate you all for your great attention and for your great input today. Thank you, Lena, for reading out loud and for all of your thoughts, and thanks for your questions and comments. And thank you most of all, for the work you do out there in the world. It's really meaningful and it's great to be able to connect with you in this way. And thank you, Hillary, for having me.
Thank you, Cynthia, so much for all the work that you have done to develop this. What an amazing resource. I mean, inspiring stories, filter by level, the Google Slides. I am so excited to use this in the classroom. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And really thanks to Hillary and the folks at VALRC who bought the bulk subscription and made it possible. Now, and just make sure you really share that widely. It's a bulk, everybody gets to dive in. So use it, share the credentials, log in, share it around. You have it for a whole year. So, and hopefully the next year too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, should we close out?
Yep, I will end the session. Thanks again, Cynthia. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day and a great month. Here we go.